I'd like to invite Sharon Anne Kean onto the stage. She is the Senior Product Director at Wise, leading international expansions, and she's going to be talking to us about why customer obsession is the key to success. Great to have you here, Sharon.
Thanks very much. So, hello everyone. My name's Sharon, and I'm very excited to be joining you today at the conference. I'm sad that I couldn't get to Budapest and that it's online, but hopefully this is still going to be interesting to listen to. So quickly, a little bit about me, a quick introduction. I'm a Senior Product Director at Wise, and I look after global expansions here. So I head up our globally distributed teams who work autonomously around all of the regions, so whether that's Asia Pacific, North America, Europe, Latin America, it's all of those teams. Before Wise, I spent a couple of years in Hong Kong, where I was working across the Asia Pacific region as a product director at a company called Seek, which was focusing on people who were finding jobs online. And before that, I worked in various startups in London, most recently at one called Bloom & Wild, which was a flower delivery e-commerce startup. So as a product person, the common thread here is that I gravitate towards interesting problems to solve rather than being a specialist in any particular topic or sector. Though I do love fintech, and I have worked in fintech a few times now. So to give you a little bit of background about Wise, which is my current problem to solve. Wise started out in 2011, so way before I joined, and they, Christo and Talbot at the time, who you can see on the screen here, were set out to solve a particularly obvious customer problem. So a little bit of context about them. They're both from Estonia, and Talbot, who was the first employee at Skype, lived in London but got paid in euros. And Christo, who's also Estonian, worked for Deloitte and also lived in London but got paid in pounds. And he had a mortgage back in Estonia that he was paying in euros. So they decided that actually moving the money between themselves was going to be much better than moving it between the banks, because they realized the exchange rates they were getting charged when they tried to make those transactions through their banks were incredibly high. So what started out with them doing a sort of hack between themselves has scaled up now to a global technology company where we do this at scale across many currencies, so not just pounds and euros, and obviously many people. So it's not Christo and Talbot anymore, it's many, many millions. So the idea is whether you're sending money to another country, or you're spending that money abroad, or you're making or receiving international payments, whether you're a consumer or a business, Wise is there to make your life easier and to ultimately save you money. And it's those personal experiences of hidden fees and slow money movements across borders are still one of the biggest reasons why people join our teams here at Wise. And personally, that's true for me. I found that when I was living in Hong Kong and I needed to send some Hong Kong dollars to UK, I realized just how much I was getting ripped off by the hidden fees that were buried in the exchange rate that I was offered by my bank at the time. So how do we solve this at Wise? So we've got three products. Firstly, we've got our Wise transfer product, which is where it started. This allows you to send money between currencies, and what we think here is we're building the world's best money transfer service. It's cheaper, it's easier, and this is really where it all began. But then we extended this further, so we also have a Wise account, and we think this is the most international bank account in the world, where you can hold more than 50 currencies, and we allow you to make instant, super cheap money transfers. We can give you a debit card, and you can spend that money in any currency. You can get bank details in a number of those currencies as well, so you can receive money. And you can set up things like direct debits and sort of typical banking features. Because we realized our customers didn't just want to send their money across borders. They wanted to actually be able to manage their money in a more ongoing kind of way. Third product on the screen here is our Wise platform. And essentially what this does is it brings that magic of Wise that I've just talked about to banks and business platforms by using our API to expose those services to other companies. And this is already being used by the likes of Google, Stripe, and Xero. So just to recap, our mission at Wise is really to make money without borders. And we do that by making it instant, convenient, transparent, and hopefully one day it will be free as well. We've got 10 million customers or more now, and businesses who are using Wise. So that mission really has scaled. And the way we do that is by listening to those customers who tell us what they want, and then we build our product based on that. So that's really what I'm going to start to talk about today, is how we've done this. And the team we've got is pretty big as well. We're up to 2,800 employees now around the globe, and they're building these three products out, taking them to market in every region. The result of this is that £1 in every 40 pounds of the £2 trillion personal cross-border volumes are now moved by Wise. So £1 in every 40. It's pretty cool, but we've still got a long way to go. So I already mentioned our customers a few times in that quick intro. And we truly believe at Wise that the best way to build a great product is to listen to those who need it and use that feedback that they give us to decide what we should build next. If you build something that solves a problem, customers will come to you. That's our theory. And if that problem is big enough, you have a business. And if you solve that problem in a way that really satisfies your customers, or even better, it delights them while they're using it, you're very likely to see your business grow, because those customers will be so happy with your product that they will want to tell their friends about it. So their friends have probably got similar problems. And if they tell them about it, then there's a high chance that they're also going to come and use your product. So this customer advocacy that I'm talking about is the biggest driver of growth. And at Wise, a lot of our growth is due to these two numbers here specifically. What's really cool is that 67% of our customers find us through word of mouth. So our customers love Wise so much that they will recommend us to their friends. So that advocacy is real for us. 67% of our customers come from it. And the other figure here, 76%, this is our NPS score. And that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit more today, because this is one of the key ways that we channel that customer obsession into our products. So firstly, I think probably a lot of people know what NPS is, but just a quick overview for those who don't. NPS is Net Promoter Score. So it's the percentage of your customers who will recommend your service to a friend. Those people are promoters. And if you have more of those people in your audience than you do detractors, or people who have bad experience and don't want to recommend you, then you're likely to have some customer advocacy. And the higher the score, the higher or the stronger that advocacy is, and then the faster your product is likely to grow. So at Wise, we collect this data by simply asking customers, would you recommend Wise to your friends? And we give them a scale of 1 to 10. And we consider those who answer anything between 1 to 6 as detractors, so they're much more likely to tell a negative story about us. Those who give a 7 to 8 score, we consider neutral, so they don't mind us, but they're probably not motivated to go and tell people about us. But it's those that score 9 or 10 that we consider promoters. And those are the ones that get really excited about what we're doing, they really believe in the product, and they tell their friends about us. These are the advocates. But how do you build this advocacy? So we think this is because this comes from us having built a product that is so much better than anything else out there. And to do this, you need to deeply understand who your customers are and what problem you're going to solve for them and what parts of the product or the solution really matter to them. And the best way to do that is to listen to what they're saying about you. So whether that's on social media or other platforms, really listen to what feedback your customers are giving you. Here's some of the things that we think our customers care about at Wise. So firstly, there's coverage, which is how many countries our product is available in. So if we don't reach someone's country, then they're not going to be able to use us. The speed of our service, so how fast does that money move, is pretty important to people. You know, nobody wants to have to wait longer than necessary, but also, do we give you an accurate sort of estimate of how fast that money will move? Then there's price. So this is probably the most obvious one. Nobody likes things to be expensive, but if your price is an order of magnitude cheaper than anyone else's, then that's going to be a big pull factor. Convenience. So is it easy to use the product? Is it easy to onboard to that product, especially when you've not tried it before? And is it easy to use it again and again? And then finally, transparency. So that final bit around those fees that the banks like to hide in their inflated exchange rates. We think it's really important to be transparent about the price and the cost of our product with our customers. So these are the pillars that our product teams obsess over at Wise. And we think these are the things that drive that high NPS score that I just mentioned, that's 76 in the middle of the screen. But there's more than this. We also build this advocacy into our culture at Wise and our product. So whether we're pushing for regulatory changes that enable us to build a better product, or even helping to encourage our competitors to be more transparent in their products, or whether it's us sharing clear mission updates with our customers where we talk about how we're investing the fees they pay to us in improving our product even more. And even more than that, we've thought really carefully about how we build a product that makes it easier for people to channel their advocacy and actually refer us to their friends, because as I mentioned, that's one of the biggest that's one of the biggest drivers of growth for us at Wise. And it's in our interest to incentivize this behavior by rewarding our advocates. Because when your NPS looks like this, it means growth for your product, because these advocates will be promoting it for you. So let's go a bit deeper on how to build that 10x product that I've just mentioned. couple of things I've learned that are really key for truly understanding the people using your product and developing the customer obsession that you need to build something that makes people tell their friends. First one, so it sounds obvious, but talking to your customers is a really good place to start. And like many product teams, we invest in structured user research to deeply understand our customers better. But most people on our product teams talk to customers. It's not just user researchers or even just the product managers. It could be engineers or it could be other people within the team. Everyone does it. And one of the things we do to embed this in our teams is we encourage new starters to sit with our operational support teams for what we call side-by-sides. So members from those different teams, whether it's marketing or product or finance or banking, they'll do an hour or two of customer support along with a customer support agent. Another thing that's quite special to Wise is our mission days. So we gather twice a year together, ideally the whole company. We sometimes split this by location now because we're quite big, but we all get together and we reflect on how we're doing in that journey towards our mission. And at mission days, we always have customer panels, so we get actual customers to come in and talk to us. And then there's the opportunity also for everyone to join our customer support teams for side-by-sides as part of that mission days experience. In our last day, mission days in July, we even had a customer panel which led to a team of developers attempting to do a live code fix for a missing feature that one of those panels had talked about and identified as a real pain point for them. So a little bit of fun, but actually really grounded in seriousness. Like, we do listen to our customers, and this is the kind of thing that we do. It's just we sped it up and made it real time for our mission days to really, really bring it to life. We also recruit our customers. So I mentioned earlier that many of us have been burned by these hidden fees and we really feel the pain of our customers. So the fact is that most of our teams are actually customers. Our product is a really strong force for us recruiting new people as well into the team. So a lot of people have heard about us before they join us, whether they've been expats or they've studied abroad. And through that, they got familiar with Wise somehow, and then they either saw a job ad or they found their way to us because they really were motivated by what we're doing. Also, a lot of our, a benefit of a lot of our employees using our product is that we have all these active users who are sort of in-house user testing it, which is pretty cool. So some of us even use it as a primary bank account, but many of us use it just to move money around between currencies, or we use the card when we're traveling, and all of these things, whether you're a power user or whether you're sort of part-time user, all of this really helps us to spot weak spots in the product and really understand what other things we should be building for our customers. It also means we can test out a lot of our new features and new launches on our employees before we really take them to market at scale. And it also motivates our employees to build a better customer experience when they're actually users themselves. So, if you feel that pain when you're trying to do your banking or you're trying to send your money, then it gives you a bit of extra fire when you're actually trying to turn up for work and do your own, contribute your own contribution to Wise. So we really do see customers as part of Wise. So much so that when we listed on the London Stock Exchange earlier this year, we felt it was really important for us to give our customers the first chance to own a part of Wise. So we gave 10,000 customers the chance to do that. Own Wise is a program that we designed to increase our customer representation across the shareholder base. It's composed of long-term incentives and community initiatives for our customers that become and remain shareholders for a period of 12 months. So talking to customers is important, but clearly not all problems are equal. So we need reliable data that helps us figure out which ones to prioritize. And while measuring NPS can help you understand if your customers are likely to recommend your product, ensuring you do this as an ongoing and reliable process is really important. So you don't just turn up and collect NPS on one day. You need to do this as an ongoing concern. And that helps you to spot trends and can also help you gauge a sort of relative size of the themes that your customers care about. And how you collect this data is also important. So when do you stop your customers and ask them this question of, would you recommend us? I'll give you a little bit of an insight about how we do this at Wise. So inside our product, the NPS survey is triggered by various events. So firstly, there are some rules that need to be met for us to actually trigger that survey and send it to customers. There are things like a customer hasn't received it in the past 6 months, or they're not undergoing any kind of checks around suspicious activity, for example. So there's a few others, but once this list of requirements are met, there are various kind of event-based triggers that our teams can set up within the product. And at Wise, all of our product teams use NPS, And they all want to understand the effect their product area can have on NPS score and comments. So we set up quite a few of these triggers around various parts of our customer experience. So a few examples that we might, of criteria that we might use to do that. Firstly, the type of customer. So is it someone that's just signed up and completed their first transfer, or are they someone that's been there a lot longer and maybe they're coming back again and again? They would give you quite different feedback, and different types of things within the product are going to mean more to them. So if you're onboarding for the first time, your experience is quite different to someone that's coming back and scheduling a transfer for the 10th time, for example. Another example could be they're using a specific feature. So some of our customers will open a multi-currency account. Others might not. They might just want to send money as a one-off or like a couple of times a year or something like that. And then the final one is we obviously launch new currency routes. We've got quite a few now, and we've still got a few to go. But maybe if we launched a new one into a different market, we might want to measure the NPS of that particular market. So there's a few examples there of how we might collect different NPS data based on types of customers. But the NPS survey itself will always only have one question. That's a really common thread. And it's that: how likely are you to recommend us to a friend? And what that looks like practically when we ask the customers is a bit like this. So we send them an email and we show that scale and we ask them to select a number. And then we move them on to this next screen where they have the chance to give us a little bit of open form feedback. And the idea here is that they can suggest improvements, or they can tell us what went wrong. They can have a moan, or they can be really happy and give us some really positive feedback, or they don't have to say anything at all. We don't force it, but many times customers will give us that feedback because, as I said, like if they're a detractor, they're going to be probably quite frustrated and they're going to want to tell us why it was bad. But if they're an advocate, then they're really going to want to tell us what was good. So these NPS comments are like a real fuel for our product teams. A lot of our PM time is spent categorizing those, looking for trends, spotting pain points, and really using that to drive our product development process here at Wise. One important thing to note here, though, is don't just collect it for the sake of it. I think there's probably a few organizations out there that collect NPS data at scale, but they don't actually act on it. They don't really embed it in their product development process, which is a shame because it's really good data. And if I talk a little bit more now about how we use it at Wise to really drive our product, hopefully I can bring that to life a bit. And one of the things that's really important here is our structure and how we work at Wise that really enables us to do a good job of this. So here's a bit of an insight into our product development process. It is different with every team. We have autonomous teams, but we have a few things that bring us together and set the rhythm. So we have this quarterly cycle. And there's 4 broad phases to it. So firstly, we have a discovery phase where the product manager or the team will start to look at things like NPS data, and they'll try to figure out, okay, what are the problems here that I should be solving, or have we done something that's really good and we want to do more of it, and try to figure out, like, okay, what's the next biggest opportunity that I should start to solve either in the next quarter or the next couple of quarters. There's no real time frame around this. It's up to teams how they do it, and it's not just the product manager. Often there's others in the team, whether it's engineers or analysts, who are all gathering together to do this. I mentioned everyone speaks to customers, so everyone therefore gets exposed to that feedback that customers are giving us, and everyone can generate ideas about what should we do about that feedback. The second phase, which is a little bit more structured, and we do try to synchronize this across teams because it's going to be a bit chaotic if we didn't, is planning. So our teams gather together to plan their work for the quarter, and it's typically over a couple of weeks, where they go through this process, summarize what they're going to do, and then they start to share that out around the organization. And the idea here is that we're very transparent. The whole company can have access to anyone's plans, and anyone can give feedback on those plans. In practice, not everyone gives feedback on everything, but the idea by making this transparent is that you get feedback from those who are either near the area you're working in, have a strong opinion on it, or have spent the time to read your plans. Like, there might be someone that's coaching a team, for example. So that's the second phase. The next bit is the execution phase, so where we actually work on these projects and we build things for our customers. So we don't have fixed processes around how we do this. Every team is different. Our teams do work in an agile manner, and a lot of them use sprints that are sort of grounded in that kind of agile methodology. But really the core principle here is the teams figure out what they're going to build or what they're going to test, and they figure a way to get that over the line as quickly as they can. having planned it and figured out like what was the area they're gonna focus on. Final bit, which is really important, is once you've built this thing or you've got this test out there running, is working out whether it worked or not. So that execution phase needs to be as fast as possible, because if you've got a test that's running for say 6 months, it's probably not quick enough, and you're probably not going to learn fast enough whether the thing you built is actually going to help customers and turn those detractors into promoters, or get more of those promoters to be advocating for your product. So I mentioned a little bit here, part of this process is prioritizing. So you can't solve every problem. We hope to eventually, get to eventually free, for example, but in a quarter, you can't do everything. So how do you decide? It's not an exact science, but there's a few things here that our teams will typically look at. Firstly, how big is the problem? So how many customers is it affecting? And you can get some of that from NPS, but you probably typically need to bring a few other data points to play there. You know, whether it's the size of the market or the number of those customers that you've already got, or the number that you're losing maybe in a funnel. If you're seeing a huge amount of drop-off, then that could be an indication of a good problem space to go into. Secondly, is it local or global? So if you solve a global problem, usually you're going to have more impact than if it's a local one, although sometimes that's not true. Like it could be there's a huge market where we haven't been able to access it because we haven't solved the local needs. But generally, a global problem is probably bigger. But like I said, not an exact science. The next point is how strong is the sentiment? So the NPS score can tell you something, but if you dig into that NPS score and you see particularly strong sentiments about parts of the product, that could be an indication that that bit's worth fixing. So if your NPS scores are 120 in one area, if you get more people to be in that area, or you do more of what you were doing there, you're probably going to drag the NPS score up the scale even further. And same is true if it's a detractor. If you've got a particularly negative part of your experience, it's probably pulling the whole average down. And ultimately, the impact of that will be on the growth rate. The final bit is the feasibility of fixing it. So some problems are easier to fix than others. So how long will it take to build the thing you want to build, or how many teams do you need to coordinate with, are definitely things we consider. But I would put the other things probably first. You know, if you have strong enough conviction that something needs to be solved, you should be able to move everything else out of the way in order to get it done. And some things do take longer than others. So I'd say that one is probably a less important concern, but of course it is important enough to spend time thinking about it. So that's the first two parts. The final bit is, okay, when you've got some conviction about where you're going to spend your time and you've got that customer data, it's then figuring out like exactly how you're going to solve it. So zooming in to those customer problems and really getting under the skin of it, talking to customers and figuring out like, okay, what is it that you need to build there? What is it you're going to do to either correct that negative feedback or get more of that positive feedback? And this is really what our product managers spend a lot of their time on. So how do you champion customer obsession in your organization and make sure you're focusing on the most impactful opportunities for your customers? I'll take an example of where we've done this at Wise. So firstly, we have a lot of Indian expats who use Wise, right? India is a huge country and a lot of Indians live overseas. So it's a massive group of customers for us. In many markets, it's a massive group of customers for us. So we've done this a few times, we've gone and talked to them. But particularly interesting case here, we went to them and we asked them, what makes sending money home difficult, or what do you worry about? And we started to dig a bit deeper on that in a couple of our markets where we thought this was something that we could use to continue our growth. Turns out that these customers are very, very sensitive to price. So everyone is sensitive to price, but some more than others. And what we noticed here, that our customers were following the rates really meticulously, and they really loved signing up for rate alerts, and they wanted to track and get really close to this kind of idea of seeing when the rate went to a particular level that they wanted it to be at before they would then go and do their transfer. And of course, the idea here is like they want to make sure they get the best value for the transfer they're sending. And what they were telling us was, this is actually a really hard thing to do. So tracking the rate and identifying that moment is really important, but it takes a lot of time and it's really, really inconvenient for them to do it. Amazingly, we have a feature that helps to solve this problem. So we have a rate tracker. You can sign up for alerts and you can put in some currencies and it will tell you when it hits a certain rate. And then ideally that rate's the point at which you want to then make a transfer. But we realized that lots of our customers couldn't find it. So that was a really interesting observation from talking to these customers. They told us about this need and we were like, oh, wow, we've got this product and the two things haven't connected for some reason. So our theory was if we made this rate tracking more convenient and more delightful and that they could find it, we'd be able to attract more of these customers and ultimately retain more of them, because it's such an important part of their money management experience is to be able to track that rate and then act on it at the point at which it hits the rate that they want it to, that they think is right for them. So building the feature was the next challenge. So we identified this thing. We were like, okay, we need to make this more discoverable, and we need to make this experience really easy for our customers. Our product manager, Gina, at the time, started looking into this, and she realized I can't do this on my own. This is actually like quite a big piece of work. There's multiple parts to this feature. There's also a little bit of marketing to it, and there's she couldn't do it all herself, and her team needed a bit more. They needed some other teams to help her out. So what she did, she organized this kind of movie night for product managers where she hoped to influence them by replaying this customer feedback that she'd collected and try to inspire them with it to help her solve that problem, which is pretty cool. Like she kind of spliced videos together to really bring to life the customer pain point that she wanted to solve. Because she needed that team to buy into the problem, she thought sharing the data in a really engaging way was the best to do that. And the outcome was that actually she did get those teams to work together, and they're trying to figure this out at the moment, like how to actually build this out to a place where it's going to help those Indian customers. It's not the only example of where I've seen a product manager go above and beyond. I mean, like setting up a movie night and popcorn, etc., is pretty creative, but there's many other things that our PMs do here to really get under the skin of what the customers want. Whether it's like sneaking into Facebook community groups or Slack channels where very specific customer types gather to like discuss, I don't know, payments for invoices or things like that. Often that's the best place to be, because these customers are talking to each other and trying to solve their problems themselves. And if we can listen in or we can contribute to those forums, maybe we can get some ideas about how we can adapt our product to help them more. And like the other good thing about building these connections is we don't sort of lurk in these forums. We tend to actually contribute to them as well and ask questions about what customers are finding hard, but also a little bit around trying to understand how we can help them. So when we do actually try and build stuff and we want to test it out, those forums are a great place to actually test the features as we're building out the MVP version of them. And we've done this a few times now, forming our beta groups with customers that we've got a very strong relationship with. So to sum it up, there's probably three things here that we do at Wise that really channels that customer obsession, and like personally think it's a great way to build products. It's great fun, and it really works. It helps your product grow incredibly fast. So firstly, talking to your customers, make sure you have a product and like understand how people use it and why do people not use it maybe, and what's it like to use it, how do they feel about it, and really using that like as a first-class concern. Second bit is ensuring you're able to actually prioritize that data. So as I mentioned, all customer feedback is not equal. Some of it is more important than others, and the sequence in which you build things is important. Like there is some science there. And then the final bit is really around zooming into those problems. So you can look at NPS data, you can look at Google Analytics, you can look at various data points without talking to anyone, but that only gets you so far. And then that bit where you really go the level deeper and really understand your customers is probably the most important one. And part of that is being creative about it, and also like engaging others around the organization with that data. But we really do think that's worthwhile doing. And the idea is that this really helps you build a product that's worth talking about. So as I mentioned, if you build it for the customers and you fix the problems that they really care about, they will then go and tell their friends about you. And we think that's the secret to growth. So I'm going to wrap up there. Thanks very much for listening. I should add, we're always looking for more people who are obsessed with our customer problems to come and join us. So if you're a Wise customer and you think you could do better, you help us do better, or you think you could help us with that mission, please do get in touch. We've got plenty left to do, whether that's new currencies or countries, or even building out those 3 products that I mentioned earlier. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I'd like to take a moment to remind everyone to check out the Q&A tab. Please add any questions you have for Sharon there. Also, take a moment to look at the polls tab. Make sure that you're adding your feedback there for us and Sharon. While you all add your questions, I'd like to take a moment to show off the gift, which we'll be sending over to Sharon to thank her for her great talk. Thank you so much. So kicking off the Q&A, you've given a couple of great examples about NPS hands-on. And I know NPS also gets a couple of criticisms sometimes for the industry. One in particular actually relates to how the values and feedback translates from an international perspective. So given your background in the space, I'd be particularly interested in whether you've had any experience with kind of how that feedback is perceived in different cultures and regions.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, actually. So I know this. I remember when I worked in Hong Kong, and I was working in a company that was across the Asia Pacific region. So some of the big markets for us were Australia, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, etc. And someone said to me, you can't trust NPS because each of the people in those countries are really different. And the example that always stuck with me was, they said, oh, Hong Kongers are really cynical. They'll always give you a negative answer. Like they're never going to be positive about anything. And I said, oh, that's interesting. I kind of get it, right? Like, makes sense. But at the same time, it's relative, right? So of all of those people, some are going to be more positive than others. And I think with NPS, it allows you to filter that. You can adjust the scale. So you can maybe accept, okay, Hong Kong is going to have a lower NPS than Australia, but it doesn't really make it less useful. It still tells you what your most positive customers are saying, and it still tells you what the most negative ones are saying. So I believe that relativity is important, but at the same time, I do think you should acknowledge that not every country or culture is the same. I've seen that from working in a few other markets. I'm English and I've spent a lot of time in London, but I've worked on the other side of the world, and I do have a great empathy for the fact that we're not all the same. So I think NPS can still work. I think the power of it really is that it's a direct connection to your customers, and if you can't listen to that, then that's a problem. And if you can listen to it and you see that it's you see that there's a lot of noise to signal ratio, maybe the data isn't as clear as you need it to be, then use it as a prompt and then just go and interrogate it further. So go and talk to customers a bit more if you don't trust that data. But the principle of it, that some of your customers are going to advocate for you because they have a good experience, whereas others are going to tell you that it's terrible because they really they found it frustrating, I think is really powerful. And at the end of the day, it doesn't exist on its own. You always need more. I think hopefully I managed to share that. It's like you can measure NPS, you can make it structured, you can measure it over a period of time, but that's not enough. You've still got to tell that story and really inspire a team to work on your problem. Or you need to dig deeper and understand from the customers, what is it that you should build to solve it? So it doesn't exist in isolation either.
And speaking about the metric in isolation, you talked a bit about how you relate that to qualitative feedback. I'm wondering if you also explore that in relation to other quantitative metrics, maybe product usage data, and how you help reconcile those different insights.
Yeah, we absolutely do. I think this is probably quite personal and quite different for each team, but definitely you shouldn't. I think rarely should you use it on its own. I tried to give a flavour of some of the other data points we think about when we're prioritising. So the size of the market, for example, is an obvious one. Some markets are bigger than others, so you should probably go for the bigger ones first as far as possible. The addressable audience in those markets, so in a market where people just don't travel or they don't need to spend money overseas, maybe launching a debit card is not as important as a different feature there. So it really varies. But definitely you shouldn't just use it on its own. There's probably features and data coming out of your product that's going to help you as well. Like you might see that the funnel, for example, for your onboarding process gives you some pretty important clues about which areas are have the most friction, and then you can overlay that with your NPS feedback and understand a bit about what that experience felt like from a customer's perspective. So it's not an exact science. I guess my personal philosophy on product also is you don't need 100% conviction to build something. Get something that's probably 80% good enough. and then build a test that really validates it and validates it as fast as possible. Because at the end of the day, you're never going to know for sure whether your solution is right. The best you can do is gather data that points you in a direction that you're confident enough with. So again, like your product building process is a really important tool here, I think.
Thanks for that answer. We have another question here from Anna. How do you categorize NPS feedback, and how do you communicate back your prioritization of future features?
Yeah, good question. So again, I would say this probably varies a little bit per team. So at Wise, we've got teams that cover everything from financial crime to onboarding customers or conversion funnel kind of teams, to teams that think specifically about a certain product. So for example, our debit card. And the way they categorize data is going to be quite different. So to give an example, if you're going to work on the debit card product, there's a few things that need to happen for a customer to use that. They need to sign up, they need to pay a small fee, they need to actually receive that physical card through the post and then activate it and then start using it. So they'll go into shops, for example, and tap that card. They'll carry it around with them, hopefully, and use it quite a lot. Whereas a team that's thinking about how do we stop financial crime are probably actually more behind the scenes, and they're thinking about the data that customers are giving us, how to process it, and then how to actually react to it and maybe stop customers when they do something suspicious. So if you think about the kind of feedback customers might give here, it's going to be quite different. With the debit cards, you might have a theme around the quality of the physical card itself. So it might get scratched really easily, or it might not work in certain ATMs. And that kind of feedback around the card itself, the physical nature of it, could be a theme. Another example would be, well, how you pay for the card and how you activate the account. So there's an online transaction there where you've actually got to make a payment, and like that could be another theme. Neither of those themes are going to be any use for the team that's thinking about financial crime. Some of the things they might be thinking about is, well, the accuracy of their decision making, which is much more about probably the quality of the data we collect or the way we process it. So the themes are really going to be product centric, I would say. And the only thing that's common is that some of them are going to be positive and some of them will be negative. So that NPS kind of scoring sentiment level is maybe the only thing that's common. But even then, I think that's probably a bit subjective too. So it's really a team concern. And that's one of the reasons why we really champion this idea of autonomous teams and let the teams set this data up in a way that suits them. So having a global NPS structure is probably not a good way for us to operate, because our product is big, it's quite diverse, and each team has a different set of needs in terms of the data and the decision making that they're trying to do.
Thanks for that. A question from Laszlo here. The name of the brand just changed this year. What was the impact of that on customer NPS?
That's a great question. So we didn't change the name of the brand specifically with NPS in mind, which is probably the first thing to say. The reason we changed from TransferWise to Wise was because we started out with money transfer. So as I talked through our 3 products, back in 2011 when we started out, TransferWise was the perfect name for us because we were just doing money transfers. But if you fast forward to now, we've got way more products and we serve way more use cases. So we kind of outgrew the name and we knew we needed to change it, and we knew that would be difficult because a lot of people know us as TransferWise, and that's really valuable because Google search terms and the ability to discover us is really important. But we knew that the longer we stayed with TransferWise, the less opportunity we would have to tell people about all these other things that we can do for them. So that was really the driver for it, and we took a bit of a risk here in terms of losing that familiarity of name. And we definitely saw a bit of that effect. So we went with it, and we've been working through exactly what impact it had. We hope the impact is positive ultimately, and that people understand our brand and our company better. Ideally, we see more people understanding that you can get a multi-currency account that allows you to send, spend, and receive money rather than just being a money transfer service. There's probably some stuff that comes through an NPS there, but I don't think it's going to be a big thing for us, to be honest. We still provide the same service that we did, and we still either delight customers in certain situations or frustrate them in others. So we're not perfect. We definitely get some detractors, and we take that detractor feedback and we work on it. But I don't think the rebrand is something that's really polarized people. We'll occasionally get questions about, well, why did you change your name? That's interesting. Or people might comment and say that's a terrible idea or that's a terrible name. But it's not really the kind of thing that makes people furious enough to give us NPS feedback. So yeah, it's quite it's just not really connected, I don't think.
Thank you. I think many of us associate Wise pretty heavily with travel. It's probably one situation where many of us suddenly get exposed to many currencies, which, as you said, is kind of one of that foundational starting points as a company. That's obviously something which changed pretty dramatically over the past year and a half. I wonder if you have any interesting anecdotes about how that changed your work as a product manager, as a product leader within the company.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, look, COVID, I think it changed a lot of things for a lot of people. And at Wise, yeah, probably the most obvious product impact for us was when people stopped traveling. They obviously stopped using their debit card in different countries because they weren't traveling. So some people were still using it because they would have an account because they were an expat, right? And they'd be permanently located in a country that they'd moved to. And that was less impacted. In fact, they were more likely to stay in that country because they probably couldn't have left. But the people who have a use case for travel, so their main reason for having a Wise account is they want to use that card every time they go overseas. Yeah, we saw that impacted because clearly nobody could travel. We've seen it come back though, as the world has opened up again. We see more of that. But I guess what we saw was that everything else kept working. It was a minor part of our customer base, that minor behavior that changed there. And in terms of our product work, well, it didn't actually have that much of an impact. I guess firstly because we weren't sure how long this was going to last. I don't think anyone knew how long it was going to last. So we were like, well, we're not going to make any knee-jerk decisions right now to change anything, because in March 2020, when this all started, I don't think anyone could have predicted how long it would take to roll out vaccinations or to restore some semblance of normality with travel again. So we're like, we're just not going to do that. We're not going to react. We're going to monitor it. We're going to look at the data, and we're going to see what that tells us and do that over a bit of a longer period of time, rather than just reacting in 1 week to sort of, we didn't shut down our card team, for example, the week that everyone stopped traveling. The other thing to think about here is actually the impact on our teams though. So one thing we did see was initially, right, we've all got to go onto Zoom, much as we are right now. And a lot of our teams had to change the way they met with each other, or the way they worked, and the way they did ideation, or even the way we did customer interviews. So we couldn't go and sit next to customers anymore. We had to do it all through Zoom or through phone calls. And that was actually pretty hard. I think probably everyone has gone through this, but there's been a lot of adaptation. People find their energy in different ways. People do their jobs in different ways. Some people are more impacted by this than others. But probably over the course of that year and a half or whatever it is, we've really had to adapt some of our processes and figure out how we get our teams to be operating in this new environment. But the things we're building and the customer problems we're solving really haven't changed that much. There's a few things that have. So I guess the opposite of the cards example is there's been a lot more online shopping, and that's something that we definitely help to solve. If you're buying online, you're buying in a different currency. If you use some of the other payment providers out there, they're very likely to charge you an inflated fee and hide that in the exchange rate. So we think we can help solve that problem. And these were all things we were working on anyway. So it's a case of kind of watching some areas grow and watching others maybe temporarily slow down. But I think probably more the important one is how do we keep our teams going, and how do we cover up some of the gaps that might have appeared when we couldn't just go and sit next to a customer to talk to them, because that's a really powerful thing for us. It gives us energy and it gives us that fire to want to go and solve the problem, but it also gives us that really important data about how to solve it. So yeah, that's a bit of a summary of our perspective of the last year and a half.